My name is Marcin Fronia from the Institute of Sociology and Philosophy and Sociology, Polish Academy of Science. The title of this presentation is Social Forecasting in the Time of the Anthropocene. The aim of my presentation is to reflect on the extent to which social analysis needs or should take into account the perspective of the future in the changing times of the Anthropocene. In order to analyze the meaning and influence of the future on the present, it is first of all necessary to determine of what future we are talking about. To what extent is the future we want to relate to the present determined? Can any measures used in the analysis of the past and the present be related to it? What kind of data can we generate for the analysis of the future and for the future-present relationship? What methods can help us to operationalize these questions? I would like to present some methodological reflections on the usefulness of some research methods in the analysis of social forecasting. It means a few things. Firstly, it means they need to analyze the influence of the relationship between human and non-human actors, in the sense used by Latour and other constructivists. Non-human actors include, here in the context of Anthropocene, climate, land, animal species, various natural environments, animate and unanimate nature, on the quality of social life. Second, it means the ability to construct potential scenarios for the development of such relationship, as thinking about the future can only be considered in terms of the eventualities. Nevertheless, it is important to indicate the factors that have a greater and lesser impact on the specific state of future social relationships. Thirdly, as I will say later, the historical relations of human and non-human actors in the Anthropocene era became so inseparable that creating a narrative about social change and social life of people is more and more difficult to separate from the dependencies it has in relations with non-human actors. On the other hand, talking about the future of the natural environment and animal species cannot be separated from the analysis of the further development of human actors, the assessment of the activity and the consequences of this activity on the conditions of Earth, natural environment, biodiversity, or species disappearance. This third argument seems to me quite important to emphasize the shift in thinking about social change as well as the role of social forecasting. We as humans shaped our past. We can therefore also shape our future because of our responsibility to future generations. That's the quotation. And this quotation is how, in a nutshell, we could present the alarming discourse about the Anthropocene derived from the Club of Rome Limits to Growth report. Of course, we can also shape our future without worrying about fate of future generations, without learning lessons from the history, and with a business as usual approach. Such an approach is also often considered as one of the options in the analyzed development scenarios, for example, in case of climate policies. One could ask even more bluntly, is it possible in the Anthropocene era, the era of which the quality of life on the planet was firstly irreversible, influenced by man, to conduct an analysis without taking into account the consequences of the dependence of human activities and their effects on the natural world? These consequences naturally lead to the questions about how to analyze the future, how to operationalize it for the purposes of social analysis. Timing the future by attempting to analyze it is also timing the collective fear. We have all felt it in recent months as we experience the negative social effects of COVID-19. An example is the growing popularity of epidemiological models in various types of analysis. As we live in the world of digital communication, one of the methods of predicting certain trends in certain social behaviors is to analyze our digital footprints. For example, how and what we communicate on the internet. In a recent publication in Nature, social media researchers called this process infodemic analysis. Researchers analyze the interactions, for example, the engagement that users have with COVID-19 topics on each of popular social media platforms. The upper panel of this figure in the presenting slide shows users' engagement around the COVID-19 topic. Despite the differences among platforms, we can observe that users behave similarly for what concern the dynamic of reactions and content consumption. Indeed, users' interactions with COVID-19 content present attention patterns similar to any other topic. The highest volume of interactions in terms of posting and commenting can be observed on mainstream platforms such as YouTube and Twitter. This case shows that efforts to simulate the spreading of information on social media by reproducing real data have mostly applied variants and of standard epidemic models. Authors of this research believe that the understanding of social dynamics between content consumptions and social media platforms is an important research subject, since it may help to design more efficient epidemic models accounting for social behavior and to design more effective and tailored communication strategies in times of crisis. Digital media provides a huge amount of data. Similar analyses of communication in social media are increasingly often conducted around the topic of climate change. There is a growing awareness of the negative consequences of climate change, species extinctions, climate migration, and conflict over natural resources, all related to the era of Anthropocene. Gradually, more and more people are starting to be part of this process. The effectiveness of institutions responsible for the implementation of climate policy is also assessed. In this case, I will not refer more deeply to the arguments of the so-called climate denialists, as it is more a subject of journalism and a media construct than a science subject. Climate denialism researchers say this literature tends to be pseudoscientific, meaning that it appears to be scientific while not actually meeting the scientific credibility standards. On the other hand, the frequency of the topic of climate denialism in peer-reviewed scientific journals is within a few percent of the scientific error, which is presented also on this slide. My presentation is therefore an attempt to reflect on how, thanks to use of various social forecasting methods and techniques, we can analyze social phenomena in the Anthropocene era. That is, at the time when the relations between the social world and the world of nature are permanently interdependent. Some of these methods are quite narrowly applicable. They relate to selected phenomena and variables. Others have greater analytical potential and can be triangulated with more research problems, as well as different types of data. The issues of social forecasting can be considered by adopting various research perspectives. One of the most widespread perspectives in social sciences is the focus on the behavior of both social individuals and entire societies. This approach is also convenient for presenting the key problems of social forecasting from the point of view of social practice. Behavior has so far been the main focus, if not an essential part of the most social predictions. This perspective is changing with the stronger presence of the concept of the Anthropocene in social sciences. Anthropocene has become one of the most important concepts in the contemporary environmental reflection. As emphasized by commentators analyzing the Anthropocene discourse, this category already plays a unique role. It binds the discussions of intellectuals who have not previously communicated with each other. It asks, among others, that it managed to unite geologists, for example, and climatologists, economists, and social scientists. It is estimated that no other concept has attracted so much attention and has been so influential within pro-environmental thinking. As it was stressed by the Anthropocene Working Group of the International Commission on Stratigraphy, the Anthropocene was not made in a day, nor was it created uniformly. The material records of human alteration of Earth are thick, deep, and heterogeneous. They highlight huge social, cultural, and technological differences across time and space. The Anthropocene is a post-environmental era. Environment researchers emphasize that the very border between what is natural and what is man-made, between the unpolluted environment, for example, and the human praxis era, has become impossible to locate today. It does not have an absolute character, precisely because of the degree of transformation of the earth by man. Choose the social behavior of individuals or communities analyzed today can no longer be separated from the impact on the processing of environment. This impact, in turn, in many dimensions to which we know in terms, thanks to geologists and climatologists, becomes irreversible. Predicting the social behavior of individuals and communities in the Anthropocene era means the analysis of variants and the pace of further environmental processing and the related consequences, both environmental and social. So far, social sciences have developed a specific set of tools that have been most often used to analyze social behavior, somehow taken from the perspective related to the relationship with the environment. Forecasting has been important in sociological thought. Early European sociologists argued that societies progress through inevitable historical stages. Those theories helped sociologists predict all societies' futures. Sociologists have contributed several social forecasting concepts that were historically significant enough to become traditional orientations in the analysis of the future. William Ogburn, for example, held that in the modern world, technological inventions commonly come first and social effects later. By reason of this lag, it is possible, he argued, to anticipate the future and plan for its eventualities. In social sciences, tools and methodologies for the development of predictive and social forecasting analysis developed relatively slowly and with the resistance of sociologists themselves. In one of the social research, sociologists were asked to put aside value-free scientific rules and attempt to construct preferable futures that might help mankind survive for the next 20 years. It is professionally permissible for sociologists to examine social change both currently and retrospectively, but making a forecast leaves one liable to being labeled utopian. Utopian thinking is a disrepute because past advocates allowed their values to cloud their constructions. However, images of the future provides goals and determine how people plan and therefore how they behave in the present. Some thought utopians that would perform necessary social planning functions by constructing alternative directions. Sociologists analyze society's static interconnections and concentrate on the social structures that persist. They have not developed skill in isolating sequences of dynamic social behavior. They, they are better at categorizing and typing people than at predicting how individuals might change from one type to another. Many sociologists feel that not enough is known to predict future events. They point to economists and demographers and ask if they are failing with the more quantitative data. How can complex social changes be anticipated? One school of thought sees sociology as a qualitative art form that will never be a statistically modeled science. Critical sociologists object on moral grounds. They feel that society requires essential restructuring before positive change can be affected. Since most forecasting is based on models of the current structure, they feel that it sanctions unjust social arrangements. So when it comes to qualitative forecasting methods, the future analysts see the challenge being not just to forecast what the future will be, but to make it what it ought to be. The actual future is too complex to be predefined, but possible futures can be constructed that can be instructive. In addition, secondary forecasts can be made that estimate the effects of policy actions on the original course of development. The pace of change is considered too rapid to be captured by traditional methods reliance on a careful quantitative reconstruction of the past. One of the researchers, Allen, pointed this justifies the use of experts' opinion and futures methods are ways of systematizing those judgments. Demography, for example, is the most established form of social forecasting, as its methods and record can be found elsewhere. In this presentation and further discussion, we can briefly discuss one example, a method that has wide influence and what can be learned from its frequent failures to predict future population sizes. A cohort is an aggregate of individuals of similar age who therefore experience events during the same time period. Cohort analysis as one of the demographic methods was first used by Norman Ryder to study the changing fertility behaviors of women born during the same 5-year period. Since that time, cohorts have been used in the study of many areas of social change to differentiate the changes that result from individuals maturing through the stages of life from those caused by powerful social events or value shifts. But demographers failed to anticipate the post-war baby boom and onset of its decline, an onset of its decline. These errors were due to assumption drag, pointed by Usher, to continued use of assumption long after the validity has been contradicted by data. Other critics says that demographers probably ignored these turning points. They reassured each other that the assumptions and the extrapolations from the past trends would soon reassert themselves in the data. Recognition of this error of developing an isolated club of forecasters has helped economists and will help sociologists avoid a similar regimentation of estimates. This example shows very clearly how important the interdisciplinary cooperation of researchers on the analyzed data is in the Anthropocene era. Next example from the demography and statistics time series regressions, uncover structural relationships involved in the history of two or more variables. Before the relationship can be assessed, source of error must be isolated and controlled. The most important of these errors are: one, the overall trend of change that would obscure any specific interrelations, and the second, the autocorrelation effect of internal dependence of an observation on previous observations. If a relationship seems to explain the data series movement, it is tested with ex post forecasts that can be verified within the range of available data. If this succeeds, says, for example, Nobel Prize laureate Elinor Ostrom, ex ante forecast can be used to provide educated guesses about the path of the variable into a blind future. Ostrom used this methodology in her research into the common pasture paradox and the uncontrolled use of natural resources. Forecasting has been for a long time central in business and government planning. Even though many of these forecasts' essential variables are social and are found in social contexts, economists have become society's designated forecasters. Environmental sociologists not change this imbalance easily, but there are some indications that forecasting may finally become part of everyday sociological work. The future acceptance of forecasting also depends on sociologists' ability to improve the preparation and presentation of forecasts by using the traditional strengths. Forecasts will be accepted by policymakers and the public only when the quasi-theories they hold about the future are specifically addressed and proved false. Sociologists know this better than other social scientists do. They also are used to the data of various and multiple causes acting in a situation and therefore are skilled at isolating anticipated consequences. In the next part, I would like to present some selected typology of tools in social forecasting. First, cross-impact matrices are constructed by listing all possible future events in the problem area under study. Each event is recorded as a row and column in a square matrix. This allows the explicit examination of every intersection of events when one asks what is possible when the first will occur if it has been preceded by the other. The probabilities of occurrence can be derived from available data but are often judgments. Cross-impact analysis is a systematic way of heeding Robert Merton's warning about the not overlooking possibility damaging latent consequences. It is a tool for spotting crucial turning points or originating novel viewpoints by examining the intersections of change at what expert judgment conflict. Delphi surveys constitute an ingenious method for allowing the interaction of expert judgments while avoiding the contamination of social status or or damage to reputations because of radical or mistaken pronouncements. In a series of survey runs, everyone sees the distribution of others' responses without knowing the proponents' identities. A composite forecast emerges as anonymous modifications are made at each round. Scenarios, very often used in the social forecasting projects, as a hypothetical sequence of events constructed for the purpose of focusing attention on causal processes and decision points. It is a story, but a complex one based on all available data and usually constructed after a cross-impact analysis has isolated possible turning points. Usually, 2 or 3 related scenarios are constructed to illustrate alternative futures that could be determined by particular decisions. Meta forecasting represents an essential summary of these considerations and a bridge to more quantitative methods. It combines judgment and statistical estimates. It attempts to include historical and social information to overcome the tendency to ignore and overreact to changes in established patterns or relations. Trend impact analysis is a method so far most often used to analyze consumer behavior on the basis of available data sets. Currently, it is also useful for analyzing other social behaviors, taking into account the relational attitude to the environment. As an example may be the rate of exploitation of non-renewable resources, oil, gas, coal, and its impact on the condition of the natural environment, the atmosphere, and the climatological consequences related to this process. Big data in social forecasting has also positive sides, such as more and more accurate climatological analysis used in various human economic activities. On the other hand, critics point to the intensive development of IT tools that use big data to profile social behavior. For example, the impact of political preferences and election decisions, the Cambridge Analytica case, and so on. Today, the extensive prognosis literature is very diverse. In addition to methodological and general works, there are thematic studies concerning technology and culture. Overall forecast, for example, forecast strategies towards 2050, and fragmentary attempts to identify and analyze development trends. Some are more intellectual, others may be more technical, based on technicalities of the tools. Here in this slide, I would like to present the matrix analyzed and refer to the most important currently social processes directly or indirectly related to environmental and economic factors indicated by sources: World Resource Institute, World Health Organization, Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change, IPCC, and United Nations Development Program, UNDP. Those points are climate change, exploitations of non-renewable energy resources, social demography, loss of balance in biodiversity, migration between countries and continents, water crisis, the social impact of the coronavirus pandemic. As listed as the most important, of course, the list is longer, but to this presentation, I limited the most frequently, the most discussed. So here in the second column, we can see how we can use the methods of social forecasting with relation to this most important topic. To sum up, methods and concept of social forecasting are today being incorporated into discussions and projects related to the planetary boundaries. Those are, for example, multinational discussions on sustainability, influencing international environmental policy development, the historical analysis of human impact on ecological systems is seen today as an essential element in assessing complex scenarios of what futures are possible. So it's important, not one future, but what futures are possible, how many futures we have possible, and how we can construct them. So with this summary, I'd like to finish this presentation. Thank you.